I'm shit at high fives. So my talk is about 3 things to improve your day. Mileage might vary on these things. They're things that have helped me throughout my career, and I hope that they are things that can help you too. But I'm going to do a bit of a bait and switch on you. I do apologize. I hate it when people do this in presentations, but I want to talk a little bit about my role, which is I am an Agile coach. You'll notice that the screen in the background is people just tapping me on the shoulder, like commiserating me almost about what it is to be an Agile coach. Because when you do your LinkedIn updates to Agile Coach, this is the kind of response that you get. So this is from one of my mentors and one of my friends, Ted, who you'll meet again later in the presentation. Agile Coach, really? Stand up. So we think he knows. Now, he's amazing. Like, I consider him to be a mentor, but he is a bit of an arsehole as well. But some mentors are, aren't they? Some mentors are. That's okay. So yeah, so I feel as though that job title in our industry has a bit of a perception problem. And I think when I think about it, here at Deputy, I do worry that we're seen in maybe this kind of way, like for a product manager, they might see us a bit like a principal. Is that what we see? Marking off that you're doing all the Scrum things right, with a pen. That's not what it's about. For engineers, I worry that you think, oh, is that even a real job that you're doing? Like, you seem to be spinning around on a chair a lot, and there's a lot of post-it notes going on and stuff like that. That's fine. That's fine. But you feel that way. That's okay. For designers, I feel as though you feel as though we're a bit alien, like unrelated to what you do, potentially. I had a chat with one of the designers about what we do as Agile coaches, and their response was, that sounds really boring. And I'm like, that's okay. That's okay, it's really boring. Because you're a designer, and I'm a coach. That's okay. Now, my perception of Agile coaches is a little bit more like they're a bit evangelical. And I understand as I'm raising my hand up and I've got a microphone in my hand, I might appear slightly evangelical at this moment. But that's how I perceive them. It's not a good thing. Like, preaching from the book of Scrum is the way that I tend to perceive Agile coaches. Now, you're probably thinking, how the hell did you get up here, standing up here, and you're now an Agile coach? What has been your journey, David, to this moment? Well, let me tell you. And I'm going to take you back to the year 1997 with my first job as a webmaster. Does anybody remember webmasters? Yeah. Great role. I think the basic, you were one too. So we were talking about this earlier. Would it be a web mistress or were you still just webmaster? Good. I'm glad that I cleared that one up. Yeah, but this was a real job back in the late 90s. I did a search on LinkedIn to see if people are still advertising for this role. There's one job up in Brisbane. If you want to go for that one, it's there for you. I actually think it was one of those honey trap kind of roles that tries to draw people in. But anyway, it's still there. You can go check it out yourself. So yeah, so it's the winter of '97, and it was a student union newspaper. It was my first foray into being a webby person. My first professional job was actually a designer. Which is quite fascinating now, 20 years later. But the constraints of being a designer were very different then. But to be a web designer, you only had about 3 or 4 fonts to pick from. And as long as you didn't pick Times New Roman or Comic Sans, you were pretty safe. Like, you considered a pretty shit-hot designer. So yeah, the constraints were a little bit different. But this is where I had my first experience of an awesome team. So I'm going to give you an idea of when awesome teams hit me. And I'm going to return to that in a bit. But the first awesome team that I worked with here was really pushing the envelope in terms of what web design was all about. We were using such hot technologies as Flash 3, which to you lot is probably a joke, but back then when it was all table layouts and rainbow bloody horizontal bars, you remember that? Like, if you saw the Captain Marvel website, you'd know exactly what I mean, because they were taking the piss out of that. But that's what it was. So we were from the future in this team, and we were doing things with vector graphics way before it was a popular thing with SVG. And the team that I've got there, I think really fondly of it, because we really pushed the envelope and we did really well. We exceeded the expectations of the clients that we had, and it was just really rewarding. Like, in preparation for this presentation, I've actually reached back out to those people who were on that team, because I got a little bit misty-eyed thinking about it. Yeah, so in that design job, I got exposed to people doing a bit of development work. It was all ASP and PHP version 3 back then. Slightly different beast to what we've got nowadays. But started to look to do a little bit of scripting in the browser as well. But it wasn't JavaScript at that point. Like, it was a choice between JavaScript and Visual Basic. So you had a couple of choices back then, which is good. Didn't pay off if you're a Visual Basic person, but that's okay, that's okay. I was exposed to a few different technologies, and that started to get me more interested in becoming a developer, like coming away from the design work, doing design and development work. And that's actually what brought me out to Australia for my first, well, not first job, my first development job, but it's the job that brought me out to Australia and brings me here today. And it's the second awesome team that I work with. And the team there was over at Vogue Australia, and we basically built their first website and put together the community that was still rich, like up until this day. I think they've recently done another redesign. This team was really awesome because we really knew what we were driving for in this team. Like we wanted to beat the UK and the US websites, which was insane because we're just in Australia with a really small population, and we wanted to close the gap on runway footage just taking a long time to get into people's hands. It was taking a month because it would have to be in the magazine, but we were driving for like closing that down, that time to basically be what you would expect nowadays, which is it being instant. But there were no digital cameras, or if you did have a digital camera, it was a digital camera with a floppy disk loaded in the back. So it was very, very different to what you have nowadays. It was dial-up modems, and it was really hard to get that up. But this team was awesome because none of those constraints stopped us. We got there and we built a huge community and had a really successful website. And I was there for around 6 years, and I still think fondly of that team to this day. Went through a bit of the dark ages here. Like, there were no awesome teams as I transitioned into being a front-end developer. That's no reflection on front-end developers, because they're my favorite kind of developers. They're really, like, for me, being a front-end developer, it was all about the combination of design and technology coming together. But there was no awesome teams here. This was a time of massive requirements documents, and it was about pixel perfect layouts and fulfilling the whims of a product manager and a designer who had put together something very rigid in Photoshop. So there was nothing here in this period. I produced things during this period, but there were no awesome teams that I think fondly of. It was very much about grinding through work, and yeah, that lasted for a little while. A lot of agency work. But I progressed through the ranks, became senior front-end and eventually front-end architect. I hit my next awesome team at News Limited, where we did the overhaul of news.com.au. And the news.com.au that you'll see now still has echoes of the work that was done back then in 2012. And it was a great team because it was design and development really coming together to work closely and to work together with the editorial teams that they had at News Limited to really deliver something that like met the needs of the user to a really high degree. The fourth team that I've got there is from my time at Finder, which was a little bit different, where I was starting to transition into more leadership roles and dealing with people much more. I was responsible for bringing together a team of people who were pretty much fresh out of GA and mentoring those people and bringing them up to like a fairly high standard and not having any of the bad habits that some mid-level developers would have. And this team, I think fondly of them because that little team put together over a 5-week period a project which represented a new vertical for Finder and a new revenue stream. And you'd think it'd be insane to do with a bunch of people from GA, but it was successful. And that team is still together to this day. And then I moved over to being more in the engineering manager role. And this final team here that was at Westfield, this was an awesome team again, but this team was built on all of the principles of Scrum and all of the ways of working that like mean a lot to me nowadays. And we had the access to an Agile coach in this team that really kind of accelerated that team's development. By the time I was leaving Westfield, that team would be falling over itself to present what was produced in the course of a Scrum because they were so proud of what they did, and things were just going out the door on a regular basis. So you probably think, what about the code, Dave? What about the code? Don't you miss the code? I do miss the code. I do miss the code. I still scratch that itch on the outside world. Mainly Satvir gets this on the grunt because my front-end skills have kind of transitioned into doing little games for kids more than anything else. So I do still code, but it's not the thing that motivates me anymore. The thing that motivates me now is the people and the process, which sounds really boring, but throughout my career, I've seen that time and time again, is that when you get those things right, the output of the team and the way that you feel within the team is really good, and it's a team that you can be proud of. And this is what all the coaches believe. So I like to help people engage in work, build the right thing, and ultimately look back and think, I loved working on that team because I've had that experience and I want other people that I help to experience the same thing. But whilst I was a software engineer, there were things that would give it a shits. And as I was progressing through my career, I'd start to have more questions around the process that was in place. For example, I wonder, why is the end of a project always an effing nightmare? You know, that last 10% where everything is coming together. I feel as though when I was a front-end developer, I'd especially feel this because I was bringing together a lot of the design work, a lot of the expectations of the product, a lot of the expectations of the rest of engineering all into one place. And it starts to become a thing where you just accept it as a bit of a norm that the last 10% is going to be really difficult. And this, for me, would leave me in a situation where I'd be feeling close to burnout sometimes when it becomes a repetitive thing. I'd start to ask the question of where do these ideas come from? And this would lead me to feeling a little bit disengaged in the work that I was doing, that I'm just working through a laundry list. This manifested itself in that middle bit of my career where it was all about large requirements documents and digging through those things, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, where the hell did this thing come from? Couldn't someone not have asked me like if this thing was a good idea or not? Or if somebody comes around with a giant Gantt chart with my time down to the last minute, I'm thinking, where did this come from? Why didn't anybody engage with me to ask me what my opinions were on this? What's the point of all these bullshit meetings? Like I've been in several companies, News Limited springs to mind, where you would have meetings about meetings, which seems funny, but it's actually the point where things start to get a little bit better, but it literally does happen. Eventually you do get to a point where you have meetings about meetings, and when you're in that situation, for me, I was feeling that I don't have time to do the things that I feel as though I'm being paid for. I'm just in these meetings where I don't really understand the purpose of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'd also have questions around Agile coaches telling me the bleeding obvious, and that I have a feeling that I never want to be an Agile coach ever in my life. But that was until I met these two. So my perception up until that point was that Agile coaches were that kind of really evangelical, disconnected from me kind of person. But the two people that we've got here, Ted, who gave me that Twitter exchange earlier in the presentation, who I work with at BigCommerce, and then Finder, he would kill me if I told you that he was an Agile coach, but he's got all of the characteristics of an Agile coach, but he's actually a VP of engineering. And then we've got Hayley Bell, who I worked with at Westfield, and she is fully, like, she wears it with a badge of honor that she is an Agile coach. And the key thing with these two is that they don't preach the ways of working to me, or they didn't to me. They have like a strong catalogue of like they've got a broad spectrum of knowledge in terms of different ways that teams can work together, and they embed themselves within the teams to understand where problems might be occurring. And they've got playbooks in terms of you might want to do this option, or you might want to take this option to alleviate this problem that you're seeing within the team. This is what I aspire to be like in this role, because if I can give you 10% of what they gave me, then I'm going to be doing a pretty bloody good job. They're not about being evangelical, they're about working with engineering and design and product, and also higher up levels in order to help the ways of working just improve people. And yeah, I just hope that I can give a little bit of what they gave to me, and it's from them that I glean, finally, the 3 things to help improve your day. So you're thinking, God damn it, Dave, what are these 3 things? So the first one is understand how you feel now based on objective information. You're thinking, what the hell is that? That's such a consultant thing to say. And for me, this is where I go if I'm in that situation where I do feel as though there are too many meetings on my plate, rather than just sit there and have this feeling that I'm a little bit overwhelmed and that my time is being wasted. Instead, I actually look back on what's actually happened. So look back through your calendar and see what's actually happened. So it may be that you just didn't have your lunch, or it may be that you look back over the calendar and you see that there were too many meetings, or the meetings that you're in, they didn't feel as though they were very productive, or you don't understand what your role was in that meeting because there's no agendas on meetings. But rather than just sit there and feel that this is not right, look back on some objective information to understand what's actually happening. I use this in my personal life as well, where I've always got this feeling at the end of the month that I've got no money left, it's all gone, and I just assume it's the sheer amount of Uber Eats that I use, or it's way too many streaming services because I've got a daughter and she needs bloody Disney Plus and freaking Paw Patrol. But I pulled down all of my transactions and I tagged what I was actually spending my money on. And they weren't even a blip of the ocean on what I was spending. Actually turned out my costs were all going into transport. So sometimes I would work and it gets to 6 o'clock and I think, I don't want to be late going home because I want to spend time with my family. So I'll jump in a cab and I'll go home. And that would happen on a way too regular occurrence. And it would rack up. I'm also addicted to go-get, so I'm always hiring their cars. And in the course of November, I think I've racked up a bill of over $700 on different transport costs. That's where my money was going, not on hamburgers from Chicky Chow Chow. Yeah, so I'd encourage you to just be a little bit more objective when you're feeling like things are a little bit out of control. You have a feeling of being a bit lost with work that's coming down the line. My advice here is that I found it really useful to get involved earlier in the work. I think the quality practice did this really well last year in terms of shift left, of getting people involved more, or we can take it further than that. So if you've got a PM that is inviting you as an optional person into a, I'm going to say grooming session. What are we supposed to call them? Not grooming sessions, refinement sessions, because grooming has negative connotations. If you get yourself invited to one of those, go along. Like, it'll take an hour out, but it'll probably get you ahead of the game when the planning session comes around in the end of the week. And you might have some valuable input that you want to get across as part of that. So you can give it a try, right? Give it a try of going to one of the refinement sessions. You can also design and doing a playback of the research that they've got going on, or there's the opportunity to be part of demos that are happening that, again, the UX might be doing, and you're an optional person to that. Think about not just dismissing it, go along, because the things that happen in those sessions will probably set the tone for the work that's coming down the line. And when that work finally does come, you feel like you've got extra insights into it just because your brain's been working in the background from the information that's come through from those kinds of sessions. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking too fast and I'm very thirsty. Yeah, the other one, this is one that I carry around with me everywhere. This idea of 99% done is not done. For me, I was the type of engineer where I would pick things up off the to-do list and I'd race them through to like 80% done. And then I'd think, oh, that's getting a bit hard and I'm a bit stuck now. What shall I do? I'll go get another ticket off the backlog and I'll bring that through to 80% and I'll get that one kind of done there. And then again and again. And before I know it, I've got these 4 tickets following me around that aren't done, that I'm getting asked questions around, and it's contributing to that feeling of being under pressure and being overwhelmed. What I switched, like Ted is the person who gave me this 99% done is not done message. And the way that I shifted my behavior after this was to say that if I do get to that 80 or 90% mark, rather than go to the left of the board, look to the right of the board and see who needs support with things, and maybe contribute a little bit to unblocking them to help them get done. And you'll find more often than not that the reverse will be true, that people will help you get your work unblocked and get things moving. So my key message is, coaches, we're not here to tell you what to do, we're here to help you be part of teams that you're going to be proud of. What you'll find is that the challenges that you face day-to-day in the squads, especially as the squads are forming, they're not necessarily new challenges, and there may be challenges that the coaches have already been through, and we're probably always going to have options that you can take to alleviate the issues that you see and to help you. So if you find yourself in a situation where tickets never seem to end and they roll over from sprint to sprint, man, I've been in this situation so many times, and come and talk to us. There's actually options that you can take as a squad or as an individual to alleviate this. You don't just have to feel as though it's just an accepted norm. If you feel as though you've got twice as many tickets in progress as squad members, again, come and talk to us. Again, there's more strategies that you can take than just sitting there and feeling that this is the way that things are always supposed to be. And if you don't know what your squad goal is at the moment, come and talk to us. This is like, to me, this is one of the silver bullets in making teams work more efficiently together, is having clear goals as to what you're actually shooting for. If it's not clear as to what your squad's goals are at the moment, again, come and talk to us. We can give strategies on how to set them and what makes good and bad versions of goals. Got a few takeaways as well. We've prepared quite a lot of ways of working documents, which don't want to kill you by confluence there. We've tried to keep them very concise, but again, they give lots of different advice on the different aspects of what it is to work within a squad as these squads are forming. They're fairly light to read, and they'll give you more information if you want to go off and find out more. We're going to do like Scrum 101 session. Going back 10 years, I'd be like, I would rather kill myself than go to something like that. That's not the case. We're going to have this as a super fun, interactive session. It's either going to be with Lego or with balls. We're not too sure which version it would be, but it's like a super accelerated version of Scrum, and it's a lot of fun to be part of, and we're going to run those in early March. For some of you with squads that have been in place for a little while, you're probably not even going to need any of this. The teams are up and running, and they're working really well. I'd still encourage you to come and chat to us, because some of the things that you've got running in successful squads, we want to take and put back into the ways of working so other squads benefit. And it's also worth checking in on us just to validate some of the things that you've got going on with the other squads as well. I'm not going to ask for questions. I'm going to encourage you to talk to the coaches that we've got rather than hit me with questions, because my brain tends to explode and I do very badly at a Q&A session. So thank you very much.